To the slaveholders of the South, she was a ghost, a master criminal spoken of in frightened whispers, a phantom who spirited away their most valuable property right from under their noses. To the Union, she was a hero, a weapon sharper than any bayonet. Most of us know the legend of Harriet Tubman, the famous conductor on the Underground Railroad. Her story is one of astonishing courage, a testament to how one person's will can defy an evil system. They called her Moses, a liberator who, by her own account, never lost a single passenger on her freedom train. But that's not the whole story. It's not even the most dangerous part. The story you probably don't know is how this formerly enslaved woman, who could neither read nor write, became one of the most effective spies of the Civil War. It's the story of how she went from an outlaw conductor to a master spy and military strategist for the Union Army, helping to plan and guide an armed assault that would change the course of history. This is the story of how the most hunted woman in America went to war.
Prepare the men.
Before the legend, there was a girl named Araminta Ross,
Understood.
Minty for short. Born into the brutal world of slavery in Maryland around 1822, her life was a lesson in cruelty. From the age of 5, she was rented out to a series of monstrous masters. She checked muskrat traps in freezing marshes, her small body submerged in icy water. She was a nursemaid, whipped every single time the baby cried. She was a field hand, her muscles burning under the same hot sun that baked the crops. As she later put it, I grew up like a neglected weed, ignorant of liberty, having no experience of it. This kind of cruelty is designed to break a person, to grind them down into pure obedience. But in Araminta Ross, it forged something else, an unbreakable core of defiance. That defiance exploded into the open when she was just a teenager. At a local dry goods store, an overseer had cornered a man who had left the fields without permission. The overseer ordered Minty to help tie him up. She refused. As the man bolted for the door, the overseer grabbed a 2-pound metal weight off the counter and hurled it. It missed its target and struck Minty square in the head. The blow was catastrophic. "It broke my skull," she later said. She was carried back to her enslaver's house, bleeding and unconscious, where she was given no medical care. For 2 days, she was left on the seat of a loom, hovering between life and death. She survived, but the injury would follow her for the rest of her life. She was plagued by excruciating headaches, seizures, and sudden, uncontrollable bouts of sleep, a condition that might have been narcolepsy or epilepsy. But out of this trauma, something else emerged. She began having powerful, vivid visions, which she believed were divine messages from God. These weren't just dreams. To her, they were maps, warnings, and promises. Her faith deepened into an unshakable conviction that God was her guide. "'Twasn't me, 'twas the Lord," she'd explain. "I always told him I trust to you. I expect you to lead me," and he always did. This blend of physical pain and spiritual certainty created the woman who would become Harriet Tubman. The head injury, meant to control her, instead became the spark for her rebellion. The constant threat of being sold further south, away from her family, lit a fire under her. She knew she had to get out. She looked at the world built to keep her in chains and made a revolutionary choice. She would be free or she would die. As she reasoned, there was one of 2 things I had a right to: liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other, for no man should take me alive. In 1849, when her enslaver died and the threat of sale became real, she made her move. She escaped with 2 of her brothers, but they got scared and turned back. Harriet kept going, alone. For 90 miles, she traveled through the Maryland wilderness, guided by the North Star and a secret network of abolitionists. When she finally crossed the border into Pennsylvania, the feeling was almost too much to take in. "When I found I had crossed that line," she said, "I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person. There was such a glory over everything. I felt like I was in heaven. But that glory was mixed with a deep loneliness. I was free, but there was no one to welcome me to the land of freedom." Her family was still in chains. And in that moment, Harriet Tubman made a new promise. Her freedom wasn't the end of her journey. It was just the beginning. Settling in Philadelphia, Harriet Tubman could have chosen a quiet life. She had a job, a community, and the sweet taste of freedom. But she couldn't enjoy her own safety while her family was still in danger. "I was free," she said, "and they should be free." That simple idea became her life's mission. She wasn't going to just be a survivor, she was going to be a rescuer. So she went back. Think about that for a second. To voluntarily leave safety and plunge back into the South, where capture meant torture and death, was an act of almost unbelievable courage. This was the birth of her legend as a conductor on the Underground Railroad. The term Underground Railroad makes it sound like an organized system, but the reality was far more messy and dangerous. It was a network of secret paths and brave people who risked everything. And Harriet Tubman became its most fearless operator. Over the next decade, she made around 13 trips back into Maryland, rescuing about 70 people, mostly her family and friends. The numbers are less important than the result. She never lost a single person. Her perfect record earned her the nickname that would go down in history. Moses, the woman who led her people out of bondage. Her methods were a masterclass in spycraft, honed by constant danger. She traveled by night, using the North Star as her guide and her intimate knowledge of the swamps and forests to evade slave patrols. She relied on trusted allies, free blacks, Quakers, and other abolitionists, who hid her and her passengers. She even used spirituals as coded messages. Singing "Go Down, Moses" might signal her arrival. Changing the song's tempo could warn of danger. She also carried a pistol, not just for protection, but for resolve. If a terrified escapee threatened to turn back and risk exposing the whole group, she'd raise the gun and say, "You'll be free or die." The choice was clear: liberty or death. She was also a master of disguise. She could appear as a frail, stooped old woman one moment and an ordinary field hand the next. Once, to avoid a former owner who was walking toward her, she bought 2 live chickens and at the perfect moment, let them go, creating a chaotic diversion as she chased after them and slipped away. Another time, knowing she was being watched, she grabbed a newspaper and pretended to read it. A brilliant move, since it was widely known that Harriet Tubman was illiterate. The work got even more dangerous after the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. This law forced citizens, even in free states, to help capture suspected runaways. Suddenly, the North was no longer a safe haven. Tubman now had to lead people all the way to Canada, where American law couldn't touch them. With every trip, her legend grew. In the slave quarters, she was a messiah. To plantation owners, she was a menace. The legend of a massive $40,000 bounty on her head was likely an exaggeration, cooked up to highlight her importance. But there's no doubt she was a wanted woman, with smaller, very real rewards offered for her capture. What her enemies never grasped was the source of her power. They saw a small woman, just 5 feet tall, illiterate and prone to falling asleep without warning. They couldn't see the strategic mind and unshakable faith that made her so formidable. She saw her visions as divine intelligence. As she said, "God, set the North Star in the heavens," he meant I should be free. By the time the Civil War began, Harriet Tubman had already been fighting her own war against slavery for a decade. She'd built an intelligence network, mastered covert operations, and stared down death more times than she could count. She was already a veteran, and when the nation went to war with itself, she was ready for a new, even more dangerous mission.
Are these the new orders?
When
Yes,
the Civil
everything
War
you need is
erupted in
here.
1861, Harriet Tubman saw it as the moment she'd been waiting for. For years, she had fought slavery from the shadows. Now the battle was out in the open, and she knew she couldn't sit on the sidelines. Her reputation as Moses had reached the ears of powerful abolitionists, including John A. Andrew, the governor of Massachusetts. He saw that Tubman's unique skills, her knowledge of the South, her credibility with enslaved people, her ability to move unseen, were incredible military assets. In 1862, he sent her to the front lines. She arrived in Port Royal, South Carolina, an area of the Sea Islands that the Union Navy had captured. Plantation owners had fled, leaving behind thousands of enslaved people in a legal gray area called contraband of war. At first, Tubman served as a nurse and cook, using her knowledge of herbal remedies to fight the dysentery that was tearing through the camps. But everyone quickly realized her talents were being wasted. The Union Army was fighting in unfamiliar territory. They didn't know the land and couldn't get good information. The local black population, having spent their lives under white oppression, didn't trust the white Union soldiers, but they trusted Harriet Tubman. She looked like them. She sounded like them. She understood their world. She could move between the camps and across enemy lines, gathering the kind of intelligence no white officer ever could. Union commanders like Major General David Hunter quickly recognized her true value. Her role shifted from nurse to scout and spy. She was given official papers, access to secret service funds, and the mission to build an intelligence network. This wasn't some passive role. Tubman became a spymaster. She traveled the South Carolina Lowcountry, mapping its treacherous swamps and rivers. She assembled a team of 8 or 9 trusted local scouts who could move like ghosts through Confederate land. Together, they pinpointed the locations of enemy camps, supply lines, and troop positions. The intelligence she gathered was priceless. She learned where the enemy was weak, where they stored ammunition, and how they moved supplies. By debriefing people escaping from behind Confederate lines, she built a detailed picture of the enemy's movements. This information was more than just helpful. It was decisive, allowing Union forces to plan successful raids and gain a crucial upper hand. One officer noted that Tubman secured more intelligence from them than anybody else. She was, in effect, running a guerrilla operation deep in enemy territory. The fugitive was now a key operative for the U.S. government. If caught, she wouldn't be a prisoner of war. To the south, she was still an escaped slave and a notorious criminal. Capture meant a brutal, public death. But Harriet had faced death before. Her faith was still her compass. She believed God had come down to deliver my people, and I must go and help him. She was no longer just a conductor leading people to freedom one by one. She was an intelligence officer in a war that promised to free millions. All her skills were about to come together in one stunning military operation that would cement her legacy not just as a liberator, but as a warrior.
Colonel Montgomery,
Harriet Tubman's shift from nurse to spy wasn't just a new job. It was the formal recognition of an espionage system she had been perfecting for years. In the South Carolina Lowcountry, she became the commander of her own intelligence unit, a spymaster with operatives scattered throughout enemy territory. This wasn't a courtesy title. It was a mission-critical role, and she was the only one who could do it. Her greatest asset was trust. The local Gullah Geechee people were rightfully wary of the white Union officers. But in Harriet, they saw an ally. Using funds from the Secret Service, she recruited a corps of local spies, mostly formerly enslaved men who knew every creek and path. She organized them, gave them orders, and built a covert communication line that ran straight from the heart of the Confederacy to the Union command. Because she was illiterate, every piece of intelligence, the location of a picket line, the depth of a river, the layout of a plantation, had to be committed to her incredible memory. She created intricate mental maps of enemy territory, a constantly updated picture of the Confederate war machine. Her spies were everywhere. They were boatmen who knew the coastal rivers, field hands who overheard their master's plans, and women working in Confederate camps who tracked troop movements. Tubman would slip behind enemy lines to meet them, gathering reports and giving new orders. A contemporary noted she could banish all expression from her features and look so stupid that nobody would suspect her of knowing enough to be dangerous. Underneath that mask was a brilliant strategic mind. One of her most vital discoveries concerned the Confederacy's underwater mines, which they called torpedoes. These hidden explosives could tear a Union gunboat to shreds. The Union command had to know where they were. Tubman found the answer. She tracked down the enslaved men who had been forced to place the mines and offered them a deal, their freedom in exchange for the locations. They trusted her, and they told her everything. She turned an invisible threat into a known obstacle. This intelligence alone was a huge strategic victory. She did this work alongside Colonel James Montgomery, a fierce abolitionist who commanded the 2nd South Carolina Volunteer Infantry, a regiment of black soldiers. Like Tubman, Montgomery believed in hitting the Confederacy where it hurt, its economy and the institution of slavery. They formed a powerful partnership. He respected her intelligence, and she saw him as a man of action, like her old ally John Brown. Together, they began to plan an operation that would use her entire intelligence network. The Spymaster was about to help lead an army. On the moonless night of June 1, 1863, 3 Union gunboats slipped into the dark waters of the Combahee River. On board were 300 black soldiers of Colonel Montgomery's 2nd South Carolina. And standing on the deck of the lead gunboat, helping to guide the entire operation, was Harriet Tubman. This was her plan in action, co-developed with Montgomery. It was an audacious strike deep into the breadbasket of the Confederacy, a region of rich rice plantations. The mission was threefold: destroy Confederate supply lines, burn the plantations fueling the war, and most importantly, liberate the hundreds of people enslaved there. This was a precision strike, made possible by Tubman's intelligence. Her spies had provided the exact locations of enemy outposts. Her river pilots knew the precise coordinates of the underwater torpedoes. She had even sent word ahead to the enslaved people along the river, telling them that Moses was coming and they should be ready to run to the riverbanks when they heard the ship's whistles. As the gunboats churned up the river, the operation unfolded flawlessly. Guided by Tubman, the ships dodged every single mine. Union soldiers swarmed ashore, overwhelming the few Confederate guards who fled in terror. They set fire to mansions, barns, and storehouses. They tore up railroad tracks and destroyed bridges, crippling the local Confederate war effort. But the most incredible sight was the human one. When the steam whistles shrieked, a wave of humanity broke loose. Hundreds of enslaved people dropped their tools and ran for the river, a torrent of humanity pouring out of the fields. Tubman later said, "I never saw such a sight. We laughed and laughed and laughed." People came with bags on their backs, pigs in their arms, and chickens tied by the legs, a symphony of chaos and liberation. They reminded her, she said, of the children of Israel coming out of Egypt. From the deck of the gunboat, Harriet Tubman watched as more than 750 people scrambled onto the ships, trading bondage for freedom in one glorious moment. Many of the men immediately joined the Union Army, turning the raid into a massive recruitment drive. The Combahee River Raid was an overwhelming success, achieved without a single Union casualty. It terrified the Confederates and proved the power of black soldiers. A Boston newspaper celebrated the victory, writing that Colonel Montgomery and his gallant band of 300 black soldiers, under the guidance of a black woman, dashed into the enemy's country and brought off nearly 800 slaves. This was Harriet Tubman's masterpiece. She had helped plan and guide a major military operation, making her one of the first women in American history to play such a critical leadership role in combat. The woman who started life as property had just helped lead an army and liberate hundreds of people. Harriet Tubman's story proves that one person's courage can truly change the world. What's a story from history that inspires you to make a difference? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe these hidden histories deserve to be told, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. The Combahee River Raid was a stunning victory, but in the official war records, Harriet Tubman's central role was almost completely ignored. While Colonel Montgomery got the credit, the black woman who guided the raid was often left nameless, a footnote in the history she had helped create. After 3 years of serving as a nurse, scout, and spy, Tubman was paid a total of just $200. When the war ended, she returned home to Auburn, New York, to a life of poverty. She had risked everything for the Union, but the nation she helped save was shamefully slow to recognize its debt to her. For over 30 years, she fought another war, a battle for recognition and a veteran's pension. Her requests, based on her years as a scout and spy, were denied again and again. The government couldn't or wouldn't believe that a black woman had served in such a way. Finally, in the 1890s, she was granted a pension, but it wasn't for her own heroic service. She first received $8 a month as the widow of a Union veteran, her husband Nelson Davis. Later, this was increased to $20 a month, a compromise that recognized her work as a nurse, but deliberately ignored her groundbreaking role as a spy and military strategist. The woman who had guided men in battle was officially remembered only as a nurse. Harriet Tubman's story didn't end with the Civil War. She became a powerful voice for women's right to vote and spent her later years caring for the elderly and poor in her community. But it's her secret life as a Union spy that completes the picture of her genius. She was so much more than the conductor of the Underground Railroad. She was a military strategist, an intelligence commander, and a battlefield leader. From a hunted woman with a price on her head to a war hero who helped lead an army, Harriet Tubman's life is proof that one person's unbreakable faith and passion for justice can, in fact, change the course of history. The Combahee River Raid was a stunning victory, but in the official war records, Harriet Tubman's central role was almost completely ignored. While Colonel Montgomery got the credit, the black woman who guided the raid was often left nameless, a footnote in the history she had helped create. After 3 years of serving as a nurse, scout, and spy, Tubman was paid a total of just $200. When the war ended, she returned home to Auburn, New York, to a life of poverty. She had risked everything for the Union, but the nation she helped save was shamefully slow to recognize its debt to her. For over 30 years, she fought another war, a battle for recognition and a veteran's pension. Her requests, based on her years as a scout and spy, were denied again and again. The government couldn't or wouldn't believe that a black woman had served in such a way. Finally, in the 1890s, she was granted a pension, but it wasn't for her own heroic service. She first received $8 a month as the widow of a Union veteran, her husband Nelson Davis. Later, this was increased to $20 a month, a compromise that recognized her work as a nurse, but deliberately ignored her groundbreaking role as a spy and military strategist. The woman who had guided men in battle was officially remembered only as a nurse. Harriet Tubman's story didn't end with the Civil War. She became a powerful voice for women's right to vote and spent her later years caring for the elderly and poor in her community. But it's her secret life as a Union spy that completes the picture of her genius. She was so much more than the conductor of the Underground Railroad. She was a military strategist, an intelligence commander, and a battlefield leader. From a hunted woman with a price on her head to a war hero who helped lead an army, Harriet Tubman's life is proof that one person's unbreakable faith and passion for justice can, in fact, change the course of history.